Welcome back, everyone. Another live episode of KBS on TFR Live, YouTube, Odyssey, Twitch. Hit like, hit share, get it out there. We're going to be talking about the 60th anniversary of one of the most important UFO alien abduction stories ever. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we're back and we are live, coming to you from under the Data Dome in Glasgow, Scotland. Yes, the UK's first smart city, as you know, I'm very, very proud of. I am Kev and Dave Baker, and we go all the way around the world, from America to Australia and just about everywhere in between, thanks to Truth Frequency Radio. Your protection from deception, and where we continue to say that silence is consent. So buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. It's about to get very real on here, because we've got one of our favourite guests in the hot seat today, back by very popular demand. And he's been back month after month for over 5 years now, maybe even longer than that, 6, 7 maybe. We'll get into that in a moment. But it's Ben Emlyn Jones, who, in my opinion, is one of the most genuine and authentic and well-researched speakers on topics including ufology, conspiracy, cryptids, you name it, this guy knows it. And he is also the guy that's behind something called the Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Yep, if you didn't know it, even hospital porters are against it, ladies and gents, and it's all thanks to Ben. And I urge you all to check out his website, hpanwo.voice.blogspot.com. I think we'll get it off Ben in a moment anyway. But without any further ado, you ain't tuning in to hear me today. You're tuning in to hear the big man. How you doing, Ben?
Hello, Kev. It's great to be back on the show again. It's been a long month, it seems, but I'm back, and it's good to see you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in.
It's good to have you back on board, my friend. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been aware that we're on the 60th anniversary of what has to be one of the most pivotal stories, events in ufology history, Betty and Barney Hill. So when you sent me your article today that you had written covering that, it was a no-brainer for me. And you were telling me that there's not enough shows out there right now talking about this, despite how big this case was and still is.
It just seemed to have gone. It seems to have flown under the radar. This 60th anniversary of this incredible event. I haven't. There may be some people covering it in various different places. I haven't actually checked all the places it might be. But from what I can see, there doesn't seem to be much in terms of special programs, special articles, special radio shows about this absolutely definitive ufological event. This was an event that is one of the most famous alien abduction stories in history, but it's also the definitive one. It is the first ever alien abduction story that was publicized widely and therefore popularized the concept. It contains a lot of the standard tropes, missing time, medical examinations, and things like that. Evidentially, it's also one of the most sound in terms of this happened to two people simultaneously, a couple from New Hampshire, USA. They were not sort of people prone to flights of fancy. They were sensible professional people with high IQs. Betty was a social worker and Barney was an official at the post office. And they underwent a thorough investigation by NICAP and Project Blue Book. So, yeah, this is something. I know that there's a lady called Kathleen Marden who's the niece of Betty. I know she has been, of course, covering this because she's been the impetus behind a lot of the work and the research involved in this. But apart from that, it does seem to not really have made much of a splash. But we're going to change that this evening, Kev, aren't we?
We certainly are. And I do like it when you take us back in time. And when I was saying in your intro there, it's not just an intro for me and in my opinion and many of the audience as well. You really are well researched when it comes to these big cases. And I like to hear you kind of retell it, your spin on it, your take on it. And of course, this one here, one of the most important ones, in my opinion. And with new people always coming to information like this, I would like to think that maybe tonight or over time in the archive, somebody might hear this for the first time and you'll ignite an interest in the whole story for them as well, Ben. So take us back in time. Talk to us about what this was all about.
Well, this mysterious event happened on the night of the 18th to the 19th of, was it the 19th to the 20th of September 1961. Betty and Barney Hill, a middle-aged couple, pillars of the community, quite sensible, went to church, that kind of thing. Not like nutters, as I said, to use that term. They've been on holiday in Canada and they were driving home to New Hampshire, USA. It was actually quite late at night and they've been driving all day. And they reached a place called Indian Head, which is a famous beauty spot on US Route 3. And they suddenly saw a strange object in the sky. At first, Barney thought it was just an airliner. He had a pair of binoculars with him and he tried to look at it. But it seemed to move in strange ways. It varied enormously in brightness. It would suddenly become bright and fade and bright and fade. And after a while, they became a bit concerned that this was matching their movements, like it was following them. It actually wasn't as high as it originally looked, or it was descending, and it was following them. So they turned off the main road and they went down a smaller road to see if it would follow them there, and it did. And eventually, they came across what could only be described as a roadblock, a group of... Well, first of all, they saw the object quite close. I mean, they saw the object. It actually came to within, they reckon, about 300 feet of them. And this was like a disc-shaped object. Barney described it as being like a pancake with a row of windows, which is very unusual in UFO sightings. And within them, there were entities. This was a CE3. There were entities there, creatures. He described them as humanoid. He actually could see them quite close, and they were looking at him. And Barney also received what he believed was a telepathic message from them saying, it'll be okay, but we'd like to talk to you, that kind of thing. And after a little while, as you can see with this illustration, they couldn't drive any further because a row of people, a row of creatures, maybe the same, looked very similar to the ones on board the ship, were standing in the middle of the road. Now, what happens next? They couldn't remember. Now, this is where it gets, as I said, this contains all the classic tropes of alien abduction. The next thing they remember, they were 35 miles away, driving along the road, and looking over their shoulder, saying, "What on earth happened?" When they got home, it was about 4 hours later than they expected to get home. It was actually almost dawn. And they started getting strange thoughts and feelings, like that Betty didn't want to bring the luggage in for some reason. There was also marks on the car, strange, almost like a bullseye-like marks on the cars, things like that. And it was actually after they tried to forget about the whole thing, but Betty started having dreams about it. And eventually they contacted the local US Air Force base, were put in touch with Project Blue Book and also NICAP. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's the big UFO research organization at the time. I think it was the biggest at the time before MUFON came along. And they ended up having, this is where it gets controversial, they were studied by a psychologist and were given hypnotic regressions. However, during this hypnotic regression, there were several features of this that kind of matched, that makes this an interesting case. For example, Betty's recall during the hypnotic regression was much better than Barney's. Now, she describes Barney as looking like he was semi-conscious. She said he looked dazed, and he was wandering along. He was unresponsive. He wouldn't speak when he was spoken to, things like that. And this actually matches with how Barney was feeling, because Barney himself felt this way. He didn't remember as much of the experience as Betty did. He describes keeping his eyes shut. He was very frightened. But they both describe creatures that are vaguely humanoid, but except they had grey skin. They weren't like the greys with big black eyes. They had quite large eyes, which were placed further on the side of their head than normally with a human. However, they were not the greys. They had blue lips, which is also very strange, and wearing rather like a uniform. They all had the same clothes on, which is rather like Betty described it as being like the army cadets. And
you know, the blue lips thing there almost sounds like some form of almost cyanosis or something, lack of oxygen. If these were beings from another realm, another location, interdimensional or out in space, maybe that's indicative of that. You know, they might be used to some other kind of atmosphere.
Well, it could be they look different when they're not on our planet. That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you put people in a rarefied atmosphere, they get a blue tinge. I've seen it. I've seen it at the hospital when people are having trouble breathing. But then on the subject of where they came from, it's very interesting because Betty actually had a conversation. Barney, as I said, was really not in any state to engage socially with these creatures, but Betty spoke in detail to two of the creatures. One she said was the examiner, and the other she called the leader. The examiner gave her a medical examination, which again fits in very much with what you get in many, many other alien abduction experiences. They cut off some of her hair, they cut some of her fingernails. It stopped when they shoved a needle into her belly, which caused a lot of pain, and then they stopped. It was as if they didn't want to hurt her. You see what I mean? And then Betty actually was given a book to take home as a souvenir, but then the aliens actually took it off her before she left the spaceship, as if they changed their minds. But she asked, where do you come from? Who are you? Where do you come from? And they showed her an image, and this, you can see it here. This is how Betty recalls it. We don't know how accurate this recollection is compared to what she actually saw, but this is her best recollection of this image. It appears to be some kind of map. Where there's what looks like stars. I mean, obviously this would be in 3 dimensions, not 2. So they must have some kind of cartographical method for depicting 3 dimensions instead of 2. But you see several what looks like stars with lines between them. They describe as spaceways, routes which spaceships travel. And they say they come from this place. Now, this has often been interpreted as the star Zeta Reticuli. Now, you often hear the star Zeta Reticuli associated with aliens and UFOs, and that's because of this particular report. This is a star 39 light years away from the Earth, but it's very sun-like. It's actually the same spectral class as the sun. It's like, well, many stars are. I mean, the sun is actually quite an ordinary star, and this is one of the ones which is very sun-like. Now, originally it was thought not to have planets because they just said it had a accretion disk, dust around it. But then later on, another study did indicate it might have some small planets orbiting it. But then what happened next was they were allowed to return to the car, and continue their journey. And it's all, obviously there was a lot of backlash from this. As always, when these things happen, there's always talk of like they maybe, it was just a big hallucination. Maybe they were ill in some way and had a madness shared by two, the folie à deux and things like that. They claimed that this was some kind of fantasy which was subconsciously generated, because there apparently was an episode of The Outer Limits on TV a few days before the event, which featured a creature that does slightly resemble the reports of the aliens that they saw. However, there's no evidence to suggest that it's never been proven that Barney and Betty actually watched this program. It wasn't one of their regular TV tastes. This reminds me slightly, actually, of the Irvine incident. If you remember that one, Kev, it's one in Scotland where a forester, what's his name? Robert? What's his name? It's escapes me now. It'll come to me in a minute. I've seen his trousers. I've even held them in my hand. But he saw a spherical object in the woods. This was in '79. It was much later. But the skeptics interpreted it as, well, he watched Doctor Who on TV because there was a spaceship in Doctor Who that looked a bit like what he saw. Ignoring all the other evidence, including the physical evidence and things like that on the trousers and the marks on the ground, things like that.
Was that Mick West trying to debunk that back then?
Oh, it's the kind of thing Mick West would actually love to get his teeth into and come up with some cock and bull story about why we should ignore 90% of the evidence, focus on 10% of it that might be what he saw something on TV. This very same thing in those days, but I think this was Mick West was still a glint in the milkman's eye in those days. But we have people like Philip Klass who got a hold of it and just said that they were, I think I can't remember which one, someone said that they imagined it, they were ill, they had some kind of hallucination. Another said they made it up. They made the whole thing up. They pointed out that one of the family was into UFOs, not Betty and Barney, but one of the other family were into UFOs. And therefore they concocted some kind of story, even though there was no prize money involved. So it's not that they can't blame the National Enquirer like people do with Travis Walton. They still claim they made this story up. Now this seems unlikely based on the characters. I mean, Kathleen Marden has spoken widely. She's very close to her auntie Betty. It's kind of a favourite niece kind of thing. And they really gained nothing from speaking out about this. In fact, they like everyone who comes out with stories like this, they actually paid quite a high price. Bearing in mind that they already had some problems from some people, not close family and friends, but from some certain other people, strangers and passers-by and people like that, because they were an interracial couple. Betty was white and Barney was black. And in those days in the United States, that was pretty rare. In fact, in some of the United States, where they actually traveled to one of the states once, and they were not allowed to share a room at the hotel because they said legally in this state, you are not married. So more ridicule was the last thing they needed.
Yeah, I don't see the incentive 60 years ago to come up with a tale like this. No, I struggle to go down that road. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. And that's not to say that they didn't make up, but it just doesn't fit for me. And you mentioned some of the real key aspects of what makes up abduction cases. One you touched on that's always intrigued me, and I like to discuss, is the missing time. This is something we hear about time and time again, Ben. What do you make of all of that in the Hills case and in general as well?
It seems to be a recurring feature. I mean, a lot of alien abduction experiences involve amnesia and missing time, including another Scottish case, a very famous Scottish case. I think it was called the A12 incident, where two guys were driving along in a car. I think it was not far from Inverness, actually. And they were basically, this craft was hanging over the road, and they approached it, and then they looked back and it was gone, but it was 3 hours later than it should have been. And sometimes they don't notice until they arrive at their destination, and someone says, where have you been? You're late. This comes up again and again. It's as if they don't want you to remember, or don't want immediate memories of what happened to you to come about.
Or maybe even as well, I've thought about this, maybe the craft, something about them the manipulation of our environment has this kind of side effect where it just kind of things become blurred, whether it's magnetic or something like that. And I'm not too sure, but it's too commonplace to be just disregarded, you know?
There's a lot of mysterious things associated with this. As if that the extraterrestrials or whoever they are, whatever they are, have some way of manipulating our environment. For example, even the very passage of time itself. There's people like who have a lit cigarette when they're abducted, and the cigarette is still there in their hands when they come out of the experience, and they're like say a few miles down the road, and hours have passed, and it hasn't burnt right down. You see, the cigarette wouldn't last that long. It would burn down to the filter, and
See,
that'd be the
that's
end.
just bizarre.
Yeah, I've heard of cases like that. And now it's important to. I think that the important thing to realise is this has been called the first ever alien abduction, and the skeptics have predictably interpreted this very simplistically. They have said the same thing they said about grey aliens and everything else. They said, well, this is really what created the alien abduction phenomenon, because they said as soon as Betty and Barney Hill went public and were on TV and in the newspapers, the whole world found themselves knee-deep in alien abductees, the copycat cases that came out. And there's absolutely no doubt that the publicity surrounding Betty and Barney Hill had an effect which may have encouraged lots of people to speak out. Maybe some did choose to fabricate stories. However, the idea that that is the source of alien abduction is nonsensical. The alien abduction phenomenon actually predates Betty and Barney Hill. There's no doubt about it. This was not the first alien abduction. This was just the one which popularized the concept. Alien abduction appears to be something perennial with the human experience. It can be traced back a long, long way. People used to give it different names. They called it being spirited away by the fairies, or they had legends of creatures that looked very much like aliens, actually, and sometimes moved around in the same kind of vehicles.
You know, you could argue, and I'm going to be controversial here. People can hate on me, right? And I'm no expert on biblical text, but I'm pretty sure there's a story in there. I think it's about Enoch. And he goes and he actually goes to walk with God, another dimension, another realm. You could argue that's one of the first documented cases of an alien abduction.
Well, yeah, you know, in the Bible and in ancient stories, there are amazing cases. I mean, there's the prophet Ezekiel as well.
Yep, the wheel. Yep.
The strange wheel in the sky, which we would interpret as a flying saucer. If you saw that, the description of it is very like many UFO stories. And again, this has been put into the Bible. The Bible's a strange book, actually, because it's an anthology of all kinds of myths and legends. It's collated by people. The people of the authors didn't necessarily intend their stories to be collated into this particular anthology. And it's written over a very long period of time, several thousand years. But there's no doubt that there's other myths and legends from all over the world in all kinds of cultures which talk about this experience. Wherever you are in the world, people from very, very different cultures in different geographical locations with different races and religious views, and they come up with the same kinds of stories. It's an archetype, in other words, which seems to be a fundamental part of being human. There's every reason to believe, actually, that people were having these kinds of experiences in prehistoric times. So what we see now with alien abduction is actually much older than most people think. We call it alien abduction because we have the idea, the concept of space travel and things like that. In a sense, that's how we interpret the archetype. But they may not, but they may indeed have been around for much longer before people have that concept. These creatures, these beings, whoever's doing it, had that concept long before. They were taking us long before we had that concept, and so we interpreted it differently. So what they are is a big question. Okay, that's focusing on the extraterrestrials themselves. They come in many, many different shapes and sizes. There's virtually a taxonomy of these creatures now. I don't know how many have been identified, but they fit into different categories. There's at least 3 species of greys. There's the big reptilians, the small reptilians, the mantids. There's the little blue creatures. There's furry creatures, Bigfoot-like creatures, and the humanoids, and the Nordics, humanoids. And the ones that Betty and Barney Hill saw, who were vaguely humanoid but had like slightly off-human features, those are common as well. They seem to have many, many different agendas and motivations for what they do. Sometimes they explain to the humans who they abduct what they're doing, and other times they don't. Sometimes they lie. Carla Turner, Dr. Carla Turner, who sadly passed away, she's identified deceptions on the part of the aliens. For example, sometimes they tell people they come from Venus. Now, very often this is long, long ago, before we knew anything about the planet Venus, but through the 1970s, there was many expeditions to Venus, including landings, which revealed it to be a very inhospitable place. It's one of the most hostile habitats in the universe that we know of. Very hot, very dense atmosphere, lots of acid and things like that. And the kind of creatures they see could not possibly have come from that planet. Yet they tell you they come from that planet. George Adamski, very famously, was one of these people who encountered Venusians. So there's also Mars. Mars is also a very common one. These are the planets closest to the Earth, so they're like these. Possible the aliens just say that, but they exhibit a wide variety of behaviors as well, Kev. If you talk to different researchers, they often speak to people, they interview people who have very, very different kinds of experiences with these creatures. Mary Wadwell in particular is interesting. She's an Australian researcher who deals a lot with children. And she says that the kind of creatures these children encounter tend to be very friendly. They're even described as benign, and the children even regard them as their friends or their relatives. They even say they're related to these creatures. Or the aliens are trying to guide these children, to educate them in a way that they couldn't have if they were just human company. Others, there were a few, luckily it's a minority, who do cause people a lot of harm and injury. And there's reason to believe that some people have died as a result of encounters with ETs. The majority appear to be quite neutral, detached. It's as if they're observing us. It's almost as like they're intergalactic David Attenboroughs who are just landing on some planet and examining us and studying us, as indeed human naturalists do for some creature in some remote part of the world.
Hold that thought. We're going to be back on the other side. You're listening to Ben Emlyn Jones on today's Kev Baker Show on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after these short messages.
Cool, I'll just take a break.
Yeah, man, yeah. We've got 3 minutes, folks. Go and get your cup of tea, stretch the legs, wiggle your toes, keep that circulation going. Buckle up. We're only just starting. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Ben Emlyn Jones is our special guest on the Kev Baker Show today. And of course, you're tuned in to the home of the Kev Baker Show, tfrlive.com. Truth Frequency Radio, big shout out to all the fellow hosts on the network. Around 33 shows we've got on there. Yes, indeed. We do like to trigger people with our numbers, our triangles, and hey, it is what it is, right? We like to have a laugh as we go down the rabbit hole. And it's really important to keep a sense of that. Or sometimes, some days, you would literally lose your mind. But I always like it once a month when we get Ben coming on here. How long's it been now, Ben? We must be coming up on 100 shows, right?
Well, this is the 75th show I've been on.
Wow.
Believe it or not. Yeah, was it 74th or 75th? I always keep a
75th anniversary sounds good, man.
Yeah, I think it's either 74th or 75th. But yeah, it's been a few years, Kev. I can't actually remember.
We've never fallen out. We don't agree on everything, but we still get on like a house on fire, bro.
I don't fall out with people actually for differences of opinion ever. It's really just their conduct, and you've always been a good guy. You know, you've always been polite and friendly and everything. So I've got no reason to.
And we've met each other in the real world. We've like touched each other. Well, not like that, but we know we're physical people, right? You know.
We did in 2016 at the Scottish UFO Paranormal
And I
Conference.
suspect, were you not at Bilderberg? Were you not down there 2013?
Yes, I was. 2013. Were you there as well?
Yeah, because I think I met Tino. I think I met Tino from UFO magazine down there at that point.
Oh, I didn't know Tino in those days. I know Thomas Barnes was down there, and I never saw him. You know, he does a show on TFR as well.
Yeah.
I knew he was there, and I couldn't find him. And there was over 1,500 people there. It was a big event.
Yep, I had a pint with Paul Joseph Watson back in the days before he was a massive superstar, you know.
If you're rich, then watch out, because Jeremy Corbyn is coming for your house.
I'm telling you, I helped put him where he was. He used to take some of my YouTube news clips that we used to upload. Remember the good old days, Ben, when you could just upload anything? And like there wouldn't be any hassles. So Paul Joseph Watson, he would kind of use the news clips that I'd sometimes uploaded, be it Russia Today. But he would add that to his articles, and I tell you what, I joke, I put him where he was. He helped get my YouTube channel kind of traffic, because obviously being on InfoWars time and again, or now and again, to be more accurate, that certainly helped get the subscriber count up. So big shout out to Paul. Not that I agree with him on everything anymore, but that's the way the world works. And I see so often, you know, you see it all the time on social media, Ben, people coming to blows at loggerheads, and we just need to be able to talk. We need to be able to calm down. We need to be able to have conversations about the things that do bring us together, the things that we disagree upon as well. That's what part of I would like to think a fully functioning society would be all about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have come to loggerheads with several people.
It's easy,
quite a lot. But it's due to personal issues more than anything else, and it is an issue of conduct. It's an issue of their behaviour rather than their beliefs. But I do feel nostalgic for the good old days. I didn't know Paul Joseph Watson in those days, but Alex Jones, of course, was there. I met him, and
he was down on the barge. He was on the barge with a megaphone. Yeah.
He actually hired a barge to get into the Bilderberg compound on the canal, because it's the only place the police hadn't sealed off. Yeah. And they were there with their motorboats escorting him, saying, do not land, stay in the middle of the canal, and things like that. And he was there with his megaphone. He was literally within a couple of 100 feet of the hotel.
See, dude, we were fighting this way back 8 years ago. We were out there, you know, pounding the tarmac, protesting away like in the corner of a field like a literal bunch of sheep in a pen.
It just goes to show you how time has flown, and we've been doing this for so long now. I started Hapanwo. I became active in the early 2000s, actually, which is now, that's nearly 30 years ago.
Dare I say it, Ben Emlyn Jones,
Sorry,
you are
yeah,
worthy. You are
90s.
worthy of the tag of one of the alt media's OGs.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
I don't like to think of myself as an OG, more of a YG, but I'm sort of in between. I'm what the goodies call the in-betweenies.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, I became interested. I started online. It's not 30 years ago. It's almost 20 years ago. But
feels like 30.
Yeah, I was at least 10 or 12 years before then. I was investigating, reading books and things like that on UFOs and the paranormal and cover-ups and things like that. All kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, this has been a part of my life now for so long, and I've dedicated my life to this. I can't see myself ever stopping, actually. There's nothing else I really want to do as much as this.
We've been discussing Betty and Barney Hill, and we'll go back there, obviously, in a moment. But in your time researching then, I mean, what case has really come along that's been a game changer for you personally?
Oh, well, in terms of the political side of things, I mean, I think 9/11 was really something amazing that happened. It was a horrible, shocking thing. But it was quite galvanizing for me. And indeed, in my personal life, when my daughter, it had always been kind of like very theoretical and distant from me when I first started investigating cover-ups. But then in 2007, she was told by she wasn't told. We were informed. They announced in a school magazine on a very, very little tiny little article in the back page, which shows I didn't read it carefully enough, that they were going to take the children's fingerprints. They were actually going to fingerprint every child in the school. They weren't asking our permission. They just told us they were going to do it. And I suddenly all these ideas that I'd been studying and had seemed very abstract suddenly became very, very tangible.
You realised that Orwell wasn't a fictional writer. He was actually writing what was to come, right?
Yeah, this really was back in 2006, 2007. I suddenly realised that it became suddenly far more a practical situation. I suddenly realised, my God, this is now invading our real lives. And I thought that, and obviously I phoned the school and told them on no account must they do this ever. I ended up in the local papers actually about.
No, you rebel, man, you rebel. The claim to fame that one, dude. Now there's somebody called Deansy over at YouTube, and he says, I met you at Bilderberg, talking to you, Ben, and my friend sat with you and Jam Noise for a bit.
Jam Noise 72, yeah, Jackie Noise. Oh, right. Were you the guy you had I think somebody handed me somebody was into music and they had a CD of music. So I met several, so I might well have remembered you if I saw you. I met so many people there, and I made some of the people I'm still in touch with. But Jam Noise 72, I'm still in touch with. She's still active, still doing her thing. She's hasn't been kicked off YouTube yet, but she's lost her channel, and she has lost videos on the other channel. So she's sort of like teetering on the brink. But she's on Odyssey, BitChute, etc. as well. You've got to spread yourself out a bit now if you're going to be serious about this.
Yeah.
Now, because I've just actually uploaded a video, but I didn't upload it to YouTube because it's on a very dodgy subject that you can't actually discuss on YouTube. They don't like it. It's about a certain illness you might have heard of in the news.
We don't do that here on KBS either. Nah. So when it comes to the woo type stuff, then what case? Because I know you've been big on the Rendlesham stuff. You've been down there a lot. I mean, I know that wasn't when you were researching, but Pentre?
Yeah, that's another. The Pentre incident is another major one, and there's actually a book coming out that has been written by Kaz Clark, Gary Jones, which is all about it. I'm actually good. I've got to be in touch with those guys because I'm actually interviewing them for my show in a few days. That's the Hapanwo show on Hapanwo Radio. But this Pentre is a little village just north of Cardiff. It's a lovely little spot, actually. I've been there 4 times now. And in 2016, in February 2016, something quite remarkable happened. At least 2 people from the village, Kaz and someone else, a man who's always remained anonymous, but I have actually spoken to him, and I interviewed him independently, claim to have seen what looks like a large triangular or pyramidal shaped object, brown in color, surrounded by red lights. Lots of small objects were in the vicinity too, which were smaller, but they were brown and green in color. It actually came close to the ground near the village. There were like strange, what looks like lightning flashes coming off it, connecting it to the ground, which had an effect on the local trees and the grass and things like that. There was also weird people turned up as well, unusual looking people, camping with tents. They were camping out and wandering around. They had sort of like they looked like a forensics team of some kind, orange boiler suits and things like that, all the same. And they were tooled up. They were armed, as Kaz discovered, which was very unusual. You don't if they claim to be from Vodafone, but I don't know many people. I don't know many Vodafone engineers who go around with pistols tucked under their arm.
And the kind of kit they were using, you know, the satellite detachment and things like that, Royal Signals. Yeah. And listen, somebody who done multiple exercises down in Wales, never had any of the kit that those boys turned up with, didn't do any exercises like they were doing.
It's odd, but this is the most intriguing thing. And I knew they were the barmaid at the pub, always a great place for looking for gossip if you're going to bar staff at a pub, told me that she had seen them as well. She thought they were the BBC because the BBC filmed Doctor Who around there, but she got closer and she described exactly what Kaz saw. They had strange equipment with them, and what's weird, Kev, is like they weren't in uniform. Like I said, they weren't the Royal Signals. They didn't have any insignia on regimental flashes and badges and things on their jackets. They were just all wearing these weird jackets, these weird clothes. They seemed to know what they were doing, as if this wasn't like a bunch of guys that Nick Pope suddenly called out and said, "Oh, you guys, get to Wales now." What are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's a UFO there. And they said, "What?" No, these were people who knew what they were doing. This is an established unit of some kind that seemed to be specialized for this kind of case.
Now, would you go as far as to say what we're looking at potentially a crash retrieval type team, for lack of a better term?
Yes, I think not just. You see, it wasn't all just about what happened to Pentre.
Yeah.
There was another strange, anomalous occurrence at Llantrisant, which is a larger town a few miles away. And there's this area called the Smilog Woods, which is on a hill. It's a dense forest on a hill. And there was something strange happened there as well. There was a large explosion near the hospital. There was a loud noise and vibration. And several witnesses from inside the hospital have talked about that. And this is actually quite dangerous if you're going to set off explosives. Supposing they had some kind of ordnance. If it was, some people claim it was an exercise, but they had some kind of very powerful ordnance which they were detonating near the hospital. That's actually pretty dangerous. If it damages the hospital in any way, it could damage life-saving equipment. So I don't think this was an exercise. The whole area was sealed off for a long time after this explosion, and when it was open again, something strange happened. Something strange was left behind. A large area of the forest had been cleared. Now, apparently, this is because of ash dieback disease, they said, but this was an excuse, as Gary found out. There was no diagnosis for ash dieback disease in that woods. There was also the area was also notorious for fly tipping. This is an annoying thing you get in some parts of the countryside where people just dump rubbish because it's easy to when no one's looking. All that rubbish was cleared away and included scrap metal, even rusty old car chassis and things like that. That was all cleared away. So if you have a lot of fly tipping in your area, if you get a UFO to land, that's the only way they can ever come away, because the local residents were petitioning the council continuously to have the place cleaned up, and they never did it.
It's like a joke in Glasgow. If you ever want your garden done in a hurry on the cheap, just make it heard in a pub. You're having a conversation about putting somebody out the back under the patio or something, because those boys will come round there and they'll dig it right up for you. Toot sweet, indeed. Yeah. No, having Kaz and Gaz on the show, that really sticks out in my mind, because that story and the way that Kaz retells it time and time again, there's something very, very profound. It's a very significant event, in my opinion. And a lot more, I would imagine there's probably a lot more people have a part of the story, but maybe haven't even come forward yet, Ben.
Well, Kaz is doing private research, and so is Gary, and they have actually encountered things. Another witness who is speaking to them. They also show me some photographs this witness took. They're not published yet, but they show what looks like some kind of object in the sky, and whether it's the area, whether it's from Pentre or the other, or something at Atlantis, we don't know. But it appears something strange happened in both sites. I visited Kaz actually just a couple of months ago, and then did a sky watch at her home, and she built a sky watching platform in her garden. Having got to know her, I think it's rather like with Betty Hill. She hasn't changed her story. She really doesn't gain anything from making this up. And it's as other people, like I've spoken to third parties, people who know her, and the other witness, I've spoken to him. This is a guy who's very, very keen to guard his privacy. He wouldn't be filmed. He wouldn't even speak to me unless I promised to leave my camera at home. When I went to interview him, he's very concerned about the effect this will have on his family. Yet he told me in great detail about what happened. He saw the same thing that Kaz did, and he differs slightly. He did say he thought he saw somebody walking around in the field near where the object came down as well. This Kaz didn't mention. But apart from that, their stories tally perfectly.
Pretty amazing. And of course, you've got it across multiple locations, right? Because at the hospital as well, there was a whole heap of weirdness there. There was police closing down roads. Welsh Ripper in the chat room saying blacked out choppers passing the house over there near Woods in Wales, and he agrees something happened down there. It's definitely a weird one, and for me, I mean, again, I say it again, it's one of the most significant ones, in my opinion, that I've covered here on the show. And again, I have to thank you for putting me in touch with Kaz and Gaz, and we can add something anecdotal to this. And I always say on the show, I provide, let the people decide. I think you have an important part of this story as well, because you were due to go to Denmark, right? We've told this story before, but I think it's important to bring this up when we cover Pentre, because this adds another element to it altogether. And being a John Keel fan that I am, it adds almost a Men in Black type element to it, because you got a strange phone call, right?
Yeah, this was quite alarming, actually. I didn't actually see any Men in Black or anything, but I was actually...
Come on, man, let me go with it. It's the closest I've ever been to knowing somebody. It's almost been there,
It was like that. I did sort of look over my shoulder after this happened. I was due to go to Denmark because I was going to do a speech for UFO Denmark. They had an event in Copenhagen, and they'd invited me to do a guest speech. And I was going to discuss important British cases which were less well known. And there's a video of this if you want to see it. Actually, it's on my channel. But I was going to bring up the Pentre incident. Now, this is the first time actually that this incident ever been talked about internationally at a conference. And literally a couple of days before I was due to leave, I had a phone call from somebody who I didn't know. He just said, he spoke with a very posh accent, very posh English accent. He said, a man with a sort of deep voice. He said, "Is that Ben Emlyn Jones?" I says, "Yes." She said, "I think you should have nothing to do with Kaz Clark. She's a liar and a con," he might have said con woman or con artist. Well, I interrupted him and said, "Who are you?" He said, "It doesn't matter who I am. I just think you should stay away from Kaz Clark." And I repeated, "Who are you?" And he just put the phone down. And I did call back. I pressed 1471, unstored number. I contacted the communications company, Talk, and I just said, "Look, I've just had this weird phone call. Can you do anything about it?" And they just said, "Well, we'll send you our leaflets over to do with nuisance calls and give you some advice." They couldn't actually do anything specifically about this particular call. And this person never called back. But I decided I would still talk about the Pentre incident. And so I went to Copenhagen. I did the tour. Nothing happened. I wasn't arrested at customs, and no one planted any cocaine in my backpack or anything like that. And I came home safely, and I've heard nothing more about it since. But it was a very weird thing. I mean, I don't know who this person
And
was.
you're in good spirits. You're not planning on doing anything bad to yourself, so.
Absolutely not. I'm in good health and I'm in good spirits. I'm not weary of living or anything like that. And weird thing is, my landline, which is where the call came through, it's an unregistered number. The only people who know it are people, my family, friends, and Ahmed and Hossan who live with me. They're mostly, I think it's their family in Sudan who call this number. They have mobile phones, and the people they know always call them on the mobiles. So
now,
very few people know my number.
In all the other cases then that you've looked into, in particular in the UK, has there ever been anything similar to this? Witnesses talking about this kind of phone call or been told not to speak? I know we hear about the Men in Black, a more American phenomenon, but what about over here?
I've heard several occasions where people get strange things happen to them after they've had this kind of experience. And very often it's far more intense than what I suffered. Kaz herself had some strange visitors from people. Again, one man she described as having a posh English accent. She thought it might even be the same person. I mean, I don't know about that, but it certainly was. This guy turned up and he started, what was he said? He started behaving, saying rather strange things to her that made her feel uncomfortable. I can't remember the details, but he said things like, "Oh, are you healthy at the moment?" I can't remember what it was, as if he was issuing a veiled threat, and things like that. But he just turned up and he wanted to see. He contacted her and wanted her to show him the landing site and things like that. And she's quite happy to do that. She's quite willing to talk to people. She's very much an extrovert, as Kaz. She knows how to handle people. She's got social skills. But this guy gave her the creeps, and she didn't. She was quite relieved when he left. Other people have had similar experiences. Now, it gets very, very weird at times. Like, people will turn up, and it's like they know stuff about you. I mean, this guy knew my phone number when he shouldn't have. Other people know things about you, and you can't work out how it happened. Jim Templeton, for example, he had an encounter with the Men in Black in Cumbria. It was in 1964. This was long before John Keel published his book, and the concept of Men in Black became popularized. In fact, a lot of these kinds of experience went into Keel's research when he published his book about this. He'd just been in the papers and had a 15 minutes of fame because he took a photograph with his daughter. It's quite a famous image, actually. And you can see a strange white-clad alien behind her head. It's known as the Solway Firth spaceman. Oddly enough, something similar was seen in Australia at the very same moment at a missile launch test, which is very interesting. These guys just seemed to know all kinds of things about Jim. He said, "Take me to the location." And they knew where the location was, but they wanted a Jim to go with them. And he went with them in their car, these people. And they said to him, "You shouldn't tell people about this. You shouldn't have spoken about it. Don't say anything else about it." And they drove off and left him to walk home from this Borough Marsh place. That's it. That's the picture. And they just left him to walk home, and he was really confused by this. Now, there's lots of different explanations for this image. There's several people. Jason Gleaves, who's a good photo analyst, actually, believes it's simply her mother, because her mother was there. There was the dad, Jim Templeton, his wife, and who's the little girl there, her mother. And she says that's her mother standing behind her. I've seen other analysts who say otherwise. They say no, that creature is floating in the air, that the arm is the wrong way around, things like this. Again, the Men in Black, the edition of the Men in Black report is confusing because that's not something he's likely to make up when there was no real concept of it. It was not famous. Do you know what I mean? It's not a fake image. I mean, if you look at it, Kev, you can see that there's a little strand of little Elizabeth, that's her name, the girl. There's a strand of her hair, which is very clearly in front of the image. Now, if that was a fake image, that would be very, very difficult to do because you get lots of layering errors.
Nowadays on Adobe Photoshop, easy, but they didn't have Adobe Photoshop back then.
Absolutely not. This was a Kodak film. He said that Kodak were actually launching a competition for someone to provide a good image like this. But yeah, you couldn't actually create this image. This would be very, very difficult to do with the technology at the time. Even sometimes, even with modern Photoshop, people make errors like that with layering and things like that. In this case, it would be really, really difficult. I wouldn't put it behind someone with hair, because hair, of course, you have to make sure that every single strand of hair is in front of the fake image you want to add to the photo. So that's a real image. It's definitely a real image. Very, very strange case. And again, it has these similarities. I know that years later, Jim, I think, died in the 2000s, but he returned to the scene with Elizabeth, who's now, of course, a big girl. She went with him. And they, just before he died, and they showed the location. They never changed their stories. They didn't see anything at the time.
It's like a 10-foot tall beekeeper.
Yeah.
No, it's a very strange one. You've had, was it Kodak? They analysed the film on this as well.
They said there's no fakery here. He had the negative, he had the print. Also, in Australia at that moment.
No, that's what I was just going to say. It's quite interesting that there is something down in Australia. Talk to us a little bit about that then.
There's a missile called the Blue Streak missile. This was the first generation of intercontinental ballistic missiles that were created for Britain's new atomic weapons program.
Hold that thought, brother. Hold that thought. 1 hour down, 1 to go on your number one network, tfrlive.com. Join us after the break for hour number 2 of KBS with Ben Emlyn Jones. Don't go anywhere. There we go. Now, just the king in the chat room who is not impressed with our choice of topics today. Listen, we cover everything on KBS, Monday to Thursday. I have people on like Doc McCairn, Charlie Robinson, well aware of everything that's going on in the world, my friend. But me, I can barely tie my shoelaces on a good day. And I can't save the world. And if you're sitting on YouTube watching this, you're not saving the world either. So there's going to be some content you like. There's going to be some content you don't like. And that is what a free society is all about, because nobody makes anybody watch anything. And I'm sorry that we don't do all the types of news that maybe people would want us to do day after day. But that wears me down. And if that's the case, that's not very good at all. And people do appreciate that we have a balance here. We look at that stuff, and I love to get into my woo. You take it or leave it, folks. We are what we are.
You're kind of a generalist as well, Kev. You're like myself. You have a broad church attitude to various things. And so that inevitably means that sometimes your listeners will encounter something that doesn't really interest them much. I have the same thing. Yeah. I have sometimes people write to me and say, I'm not going to listen to your show tonight, Ben, it doesn't interest me. And I say, okay, well, listen, I'll cover another subject another time.
Exactly. Dude, that's the way it should be, man. But hey, we've got a couple of minutes. Go grab yourself a drink, folks. Have some PPP. We'll come back on the other side, and I've got something I want to get into with Ben, and we're going back to Betty and Barney Hill for a moment. Remember, folks, 1 hour down. We've still got an hour to go at Like, Hit, Share. Ben Emlyn Jones is in the chair. I didn't even mean that to rhyme, but we'll go with it. Our number 2 is upon us already, right here on TFRlive.com. We're tuned into the Kev Baker Show. I've got Ben Emlyn Jones with me. Before we go back to Betty and Barney Hill, Ben, please tell people where they can follow your work, your blog, your radio work, any upcoming talks you've got. He's one of the busiest people on the UK alternative information circuit. There you go.
Well, I have a massive internet footprint involving various different websites.
Are you like Bigfoot? Have you got like the Bigfoot kind of coverage of the internet?
Kind of an elephant, more like.
I like it, man. I like it.
Yeah, I have a extensive list of websites, which include the Panmo blogs, YouTube channel, and radio show like Kev. I do that. I also have a fiction blog where I publish some of my fiction. Indeed, I've written 5 books. Of which 4 are on the subject we are talking about this evening, or similar subjects. The 3 most recent ones are the most important, I think, the Roswell trilogy. But they're about aliens and UFOs and what would happen if we got the truth instead of lies. It's a sort of speculative fiction kind of situation. But yeah, if you just put HPANWO into your browser of choice, that is Hapanwo, I pronounce it. That stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. You will very, very quickly come across all I have to offer. And there's a huge amount. There's an enormous amount of material there. Going back, like I said, well, I was a member of a forum in the early 2000s. I had a kind of forum, but really I started seriously in 2007 with Hapanmo. And there are articles going back that far, including the story about how the school tried to take my daughter's fingerprints, which is really what I think that radicalized me, Kev. It really did.
Have you ever had Pippa? It radicalized you. Bam, dude, they'll be coming through your window in a moment. They will, man, I'm telling you.
You mentioned Pippa King.
Yeah, have you had Pippa King on the show? Very, very knowledgeable woman and all that stuff.
Very much. In fact, she was the first person who contacted me about this and kind of introduced me to several other people, and I got to join another forum. And very quickly, I found a large number of people I was talking to about this. And I've actually interviewed Pippa twice, I think, on my show.
A lot of what Pippa was talking about has come to pass, you know, when it comes to the kind of police state.
Well, you know, there's a limit to how much we can say on YouTube.
Yes, there is, or you'll definitely be getting this.
FBI, open up!
Yep, see.
Yes, indeed.
Even though we don't have the FBI over here, don't worry about that. A little bit of fake news here and there. What can I say?
Yeah, but it's absolutely true. In fact, in Germany last week, someone was arrested by a huge, I think there was about 20 members of the riot squad.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 20 Boston Dynamics robots or something. That's where we're heading.
That's coming up. That's coming up. Yeah, they were human for now, but they dragged this person out of their house and because they called a famous it wasn't Angela Merkel, it was one of the other junior politicians. They called them a rude name.
Oh dear Lord, I would be locked away in a dungeon by now. The abuse that I give the SNP. But anyhow,
but yeah, you know, it's like I think the Germans, they really need to remember their history a bit better, because I know that they like to forget it and they don't like to think about it, but it looks like they're making the same mistake again. This was really, I can't say the word, but this was very much like an earlier period of their history, and it seems like it's coming back. And it's happening all over the world. Australia's particularly bad.
History repeats, man. It repeats. It echoes, dude. Listen, you mentioned Betty Barney Hill, and something I wanted to ask you about, because you've talked about this. In fact, you've done like an hour on the show before talking about this. You mentioned it as well when you were covering the case. Project Blue Book. Now, first up, I want to ask you what their take on Betty and Barney Hill, if you know what their take on that case was. And then from there, I want to expand into the recent TV show, because I actually caught a full episode of it for the first time the other day. When I usually find it on there, Ben, I tend to turn out or tune out because I want to watch all of it in a one, or I want to binge it all. I don't want to be seeing little bits, little spoilers. But this one really kind of caught my attention early on. So after the Betty and Barney Hill thing, I want to talk to you about that TV show and how it relates to real cases, you know.
Well, you know, the actual file, the Project Blue Book files, I haven't actually looked at what they said. I was looking into all the NICAP material when I was researching this particular show. But I know they were put in touch with Project Blue Book. The local US Air Force Base did call Project Blue Book. So presumably they investigated this as well. Now, I know the files, a lot of them are available. This was essentially a publicly run organization and publicly run research, which was kind of the problem, which, as J.R. Hynek, the leader of the project, actually found out, because he joined Project Blue Book. He actually started with Project Sign in 1947, and long before it eventually closed in 1969. So he was doing this for over 20 years. And he was a complete skeptic. He thought he'd take a sabbatical out from his teaching job, because he was a teacher at the university, teaching astronomy and things like that. Do this for a couple of years. He thought it's all like done and dusted. We just talk about swamp gas and weather balloons for a while, then he can go back to normal. It changed his life, Kev. It changed his life. He's written several books where he described as he slowly went from being a skeptic to a believer, to use that phrase, that UFOs really were extraterrestrial. Some of them couldn't be explained by the usual terrestrial methods. They then also worked out that the organization Project Blue Book was actually intended to lie to the public. It was one of these things governments always do this, Kat. They always do it. They say, look, we formed this organization to investigate or to do this, that, or the other, to show that we're working on this, when deep down they're not. They're either doing this as an excuse to make it look like they're doing something when they're doing nothing, or deliberately to lie to the public and portray something in a way that should be portrayed. There's other examples, such as the Warren Commission, which said Oswald acted alone, that sort of thing. And there's many, many other examples I could give you. And Project Blue Book was one of these things. Project Blue Book was there to reassure the public that UFOs really were nothing to worry about, and they were not. We're not really having contact with aliens. And in the end, Hynek got fed up with this, to put it politely, and he sort of rebelled, and he's written books about it. And the series you're talking about is an extraordinary thing, Kat. It's absolutely extraordinary. And this came out originally on History, on the History Channel. It's now, unfortunately, been cancelled by History, and the producers are trying to find a new home for it. I don't know. Is there by any chance someone called Dave Altman in the chat box? Because he often appears whenever this subject comes up.
Not that I've seen. What's the name?
Dave Altman.
No, not yet.
He works closely with a cast member of that show, and he's someone, he always appears when that sort of thing comes up. But I know him; he's a guy I know. However, the series, which episodes have you just seen? The first episode so far?
No, the episode I actually seen was a case of a plane encountering a UFO over Canada. Is it Hudson Bay?
Yeah, that episode actually was. It's interesting because
this is what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you: is that actually a thing? I mean, was that actually based on something factual?
Operation Broken Arrow actually was. Yeah, all the episodes are based on Project Blue Book files, and one of the episodes is based on Betty and Barney Hill. I mean, it's not exactly as it happens. It's not 100% as it happened. The things which happen are sometimes changed slightly for fictional purposes, and they also sometimes move to different times, because the first two episodes take place over a couple of years. That's 1947 to 48. Some of the incidents they talk about happened in the future, essentially. For example, there's one incident based on the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin, which took place in 1955. Yet, for the purposes of artistic license, they've moved it to 1948. They moved it back in time a few years so that there could be an episode in the show all about the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin, which is an incredible case. But it's reproduced accurately. There's this family of I don't know I don't want to be rude, but they're kind of hillbillies, or hicks is the word they use. These people on a farm in Kentucky, USA, were just sitting down one evening in their home, and suddenly they heard strange noises. They saw lights in the sky. They went outside, and they saw a craft coming down nearby, some strange object coming down nearby, and then creatures started milling around their home. And this is reproduced very well in the series. They did what the typical American things. They got their guns out and started shooting at these creatures. The creatures weren't hurt. They actually made a noise which sounded like they were shooting a metal bucket. The family eventually escaped the house and got in their pickup truck and drove to the nearest police station in a town a few miles away. The police report says they were absolutely hysterical when they arrived. They were terrified. The whole family were in this pickup truck, and they were shouting, screaming, and weeping. They were really, really frightened. And when the police went to investigate, they saw things like bullet holes in the walls of the house and things like that. And that's reproduced in the series. And there's lots of other really interesting things as well. I don't want to spoil it for you, Kev, but in episode 1, you are left in no doubt that you're dealing with a real ET phenomenon. In the very first scene, you see a group of 12 officials from the government sitting around the table. And that, of course, the 12 is very famously refers to possibly the Majestic 12. And they're talking quite openly about, these, God, my goodness me, there's these things appearing in our sky. They're not human. They come from some other planet. But we can't let the people know that. We're going to have to come up with some cover story to make people think they're not real. And they bring Hynek into it, but Hynek is accompanied by what's his name? Captain, I forgot his name. His sidekick, the young guy, his sidekick.
So he's a real dude as well, and he was like genuine as well. So I like both those actors, man.
Yeah, his sidekick, Hynek's sidekick, is not. He's not. He's a completely fictional character, but he's working alongside Hynek, and they have a very odd relationship. There's kind of young cop, young cop, old cop kind of dynamic between them. But to begin with, he is clearly handling Hynek. He's kind of like influencing him on the instructions outside the normal chain of command from the other guy, the general. What's his name? I can't remember the names of the characters, but saying, look, you've got to. Dr. Hynek is someone you're gonna have to push him this way, nudge him that way. Don't let him come to any conclusions. That sort of thing. I want you to write reports and close cases. And make sure Dr. Hynek does the same thing. It's a cover-up, you see.
Swamp gas.
But later on, he changes his allegiance later on, this guy. And he starts to move more over to Hynek's side. I don't want to spoil it for you, Kev, but, if you can watch the rest of the series, please do. There's 2 series have been made, 2 seasons. They're trying to get... The 3rd season, it's all written and storyboarded. It's all ready to go. They're just trying to find a home for it, like, in other words, a platform that will allow them to produce it.
There's a lot of content nowadays, both fictional and more so documentary stuff coming out about the UFOs, the aliens. It's almost like a continuation of what we've been covering from 2017. It's like we've gone into a kind of media push now. I've seen another big series being pushed on Sky TV right now. I think it's UFO Witness. It's called, where they go out and talk to people. Big budget. We've had J.J. Abrams as well. I think he produced a documentary, right? Big budget.
Yeah, I've not seen that yet. I've seen the trailers, and I really want to see that. But I've seen like the Unidentified. I got to watch this season 2 of the Unidentified series where she was presented by Lou Elizondo, and I'd love to see Abrams' one, because J.J. Abrams is the director of Star Trek, and I don't think he's done documentaries before. He's like a feature film director.
Yeah.
And I'm very keen to see this particular series. I'm looking for somewhere where I can actually watch it.
For me, J.J. Abrams has become like almost the modern day Spielberg. if there's anyone hiding things in movies and wants somebody to watch, it's probably projects he's working on.
Some of the new Star Trek films are pretty good. I haven't watched them all, but I saw a couple and I thought they were pretty good. I did see trailers for this, and I've seen a couple of clips because on their YouTube channel they have a couple of clips and trailers. And again, it looks like they go into several cases that I've not heard of before, such as there's this chap who was, I think he was in the army, and he was in Afghanistan and saw strange things through his night vision goggles. And there's been several others. There was a guy in a fishing boat. I can't remember which series that was, but a sailor on a fishing boat had a very close encounter with a UFO/USO. It actually entered the water and came out again. So some of these things are brand new cases that I've not heard of before. So I've got to try and find a place to watch that. And Kev, I do hope you watch the rest of Project Blue Book, because
I definitely am going to take the time. That really kind of that piqued my interest. That the other day, it tipped me over the edge. It has to be watched now. Yes,
it's absolutely fascinating. It's very different from the Project UFO TV series from the 70s. I used to watch that as a kid, and so I must have had an interest back then. This one is far darker and more conspiratorial. There's no in the old Project Blue Book series. There's no hint of any cover-up. There's just these two guys who go around investigating. In this one, this is more like the X-Files, actually. There's a distinct conspiratorial element to it.
Definitely, it's got that feel about it. I must admit that bit I've seen of it in little clips I've seen, definitely. You mentioned Lou Elizondo there. Where are you with him? I mean, what's your take on him now that more time has passed? We've both been looking at him. What do you make of him?
I'm following him closely. I think there's not been any major developments since we last discussed the.
Can't think of any, right?
Now, I can't think of any off the top of my head, except that he's been busy filming and producing these new TV programs. Seems to be his prime objective now. He has been interviewed by a couple of people, such as John. He hasn't been back on John Greenwald's show, The Black Vault, yet, but he did another show with Mick West, which it wasn't terribly memorable. I don't remember anything significant that he hasn't spoken before, because I think he's done about 3 shows with Mick West now. He's fought his corner well with West, because of course West is like this skeptic. I mean, he's not a bad guy. I mean, he's the kind of person I could have a discussion with. I could sit down and have a drink with a guy.
My only issue with him is, as people very interested and passionate about, say, ufology, as me and you are, we're always going to have a slight dose of confirmation bias about us. And that goes the other way as well. When you've got a debunking or meta-bunking website and all you do is debunk things, you go looking for evidence to support that idea as opposed to letting the evidence lead you to a conclusion. And I think a lot of confirmation bias sneaks in, whether you're passionate about a subject or whether you're trying to be very skeptical and debunk everything,
The confirmation bias, I think, is a normal part of human psychology, and it's something we all have, and we all have to find ways of overcoming it and trying to be as rational and impartial as we can. The problem with the skeptics, I've done entire videos and articles about this, and I've done presentations not live about this, is that they essentially believe that they themselves have no confirmation bias. They see themselves as the complete arbiters of evidence and rationality. And they don't. I mean, they very often do not practice this. They are as zealots. They're as zealous. They are as zealous as the most radical and flat earther kind of person. Some of them are really quite. They get quite angry and they're quite belligerent kind of people I have to avoid. Mick West he's a reasonably social chap. He's not unpleasant. But it's pretty clear, sometimes he'll say things, I'd love this to be true. I really would. I'd love it to be true, but it's not.
He appeals to the emotion. Yeah. He's a good salesman at it, man.
However, I don't think he does want it to be true. Oh. I think he, like many skeptics, he's actually emotionally involved in it not being real. And then many skeptics are like this. They are people who they really don't feel comfortable with the idea that there are ghosts and UFOs and Bigfoot and all these other things. They feel uncomfortable with the concept that they would live in a world like that. as every bit as much as I actually quite like the idea that these things might be real, and I think it would make the world a more interesting place. So, in a sense, we're more similar than we think we are to the skeptics. The good thing about Mick West and the people he has on is that Lou Elizondo in particular is also a genial type of character, and he tends to stay in a rational sort of. He has a rational attitude. He's very much an extrovert. He knows how to talk to people like Kaz does, you know, and he simply he stays on the straight and narrow. He doesn't stray out of his lane, and he just addresses Mick West's points, and I think he does so successfully. So did Avi Loeb. Avi Loeb the other day was on his show, and he did the same thing.
Are you excited about that project? I take it he was talking about the kind of search.
Yeah, the Galileo project.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something. I think we might have mentioned this before.
We did, we did the last time, but I'm really excited about it. Plus, we've got the James Webb telescope going up soon as well. We could be finding exoplanets that have life on out. You know, do you ever think that day is going to come realistically, Ben?
Well, I think so. I mean, eventually there's going to be confirmation through astronomy that this universe is more than it appears to be, and we've already had some hints of that. For example, Venus, that I mentioned earlier, we talked on a previous show how high up in the atmosphere it looks like there may well be some kind of life, and it's now possible to detect chemicals in planets around distant stars, light years away, that may show signs of life. It could be that there is a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli, which has the signs of life. It could have proteins and DNA on it and things like that, which could be detectable by some very, very sensitive astronomical instrument, which would could be the little grey creatures that picked up Betty and Barney Hill may actually be there. You never know. But the thing about Avi Loeb and the Galileo project is this is not just another version of SETI. He is specifically interested, and his team are specifically interested in artificial objects of non-human construction near the Earth. In other words, UFOs. Ever since he studied Oumuamua and came out with he very bravely spoke out about how he believed that this was an artificial object. It didn't fit into the usual kind of classifications. That he now wants to see if he can find more of these, because he doesn't believe that Oumuamua is just a one-off. He said that there's probably more of them out there, and that if he has telescopes and things that are ready, then you'll be able to get more information about them than they actually did with Oumuamua. Unfortunately, Oumuamua was a long way off, and it wasn't really examined very carefully before it just flew out the solar system again. And so we do really do wish him luck. He's got like $1.5 million from Harvard University. He's going to use telescopes. He's not going to go through the disclosure route that a lot of other people are. He says, let's leave the government to do what they want. Let's gather the evidence by ourselves. Let's do it independently of them. And I wish him luck. I really do.
No, I like Avi Loeb ever since he kind of came onto the scene with the Oumuamua. Whether that was some alien probe or not, it was very significant, I think, because it made a very mainstream audience again think differently, perhaps, about space, about this kind of thing going on. You know, talking of space in general, we just had Musk with the 3 civilian crew going up on Inspiration 4. We are on the cusp of this kind of space age, Ben, where I think we're going to, my speculation, we're going to almost build up pace and reach a crescendo of information coming our way with new telescopes, quantum computers going through all the data that already exists at places like SETI and all the other radio telescopes around the world. And with more and more people going up into space, it's going to be inevitable that this kind of multi-species universe is going to be part of the next age.
It's inevitable as our own space technology increases. And indeed, the proliferations, as you just said, the proliferation of astronautical technology has now reached the point where this is going to prove a huge a huge obstacle for the keepers of the truth embargo, as Steve Bassett calls them, because this, as you just said, this was the latest missions that we've had, including the most recent one, were 100% private. They were not. This was a non-state actor launching a rocket into space with 3 people on board who were not connected to government service. Now, as we know, the government do contract out an awful lot of what they do, but that has its limits. You get to the point where, in essentially this, you get a kind of libertarian capitalist situation with space exploration, and once that happens, regulation eventually has its upper limits. You hit a glass ceiling above which it's very, very difficult for the state actors to control what's going on. And we are going to see that. Well, I think someone is going to see something at some point, either on one of Musk's rockets or this thing that Richard Branson has got. Jeff Bezos has also got this. They've all been into space now, haven't they? They've all been up on their rockets together.
Well, not technically, not after they shifted the goalposts on them, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the definition of flying in space. I mean,
they didn't get their astronaut wings.
No, suborbital doesn't count, even though you go above the edge of space. It's not the same thing. It's just like a ballistic trajectory kind of thing. But obviously, this was a publicity stunt to demonstrate the kind of the democratic nature now of space exploration, which they are now envisaging. Now, I know some people think, well, they're just part of the gatekeepers as well. Maybe, but what they're doing right now appears to indicate that, at least on the surface, they don't want that. I mean,
it could be childhood's end tomorrow. Carellin will step off the ship, and people would say, "I don't believe it. It's all fake." We'll be back after the break. We'll be back after these short messages for the final part of KBS with Ben Emlyn Jones. Don't go anywhere.
Nice one, Kev.
3 minutes, bro. You can go and relieve yourself, have a walk, have a drink, kick back, chillax.
Can we do that building in London?
That's where we'll go next, my man. We will go there next. How's that sound?
Yeah. You mentioned Childhood's End. That's an amazing story because it's like the aliens and like big reptilians. It's almost like something David Icke talks about.
Oh, scary big buggers, those ones, I'm telling you. Give me the Nordics any day, ladies and gentlemen. Give me the Nordics. And no probes. I wonder how that goes, if we do have our paradigms opened up to us having space brothers and sisters. I wonder if there's going to be an intergalactic court that will settle all of those nasty abductions that's been going on. Ooh. There's a thought, Benny. There's a thought.
That's actually a serious. What are you doing?
I'm going for a coffee. 2 secs, man.
Okay.
A big shout out to everyone on YouTube, Odyssey, Twitch, Discord. Thank you for being here. One more segment to go. Buckle up tight. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Final part of today's Kev Baker Show with Ben Emlyn Jones. Tomorrow we're going to have Jimmy Jeans and Don Wiskin in hour number 1. Then Jimmy Jeans will be hanging on for hour number 2 as well. And on Thursday, hour 1, Scotty Lopez. Then in hour 2, we will be joined by Evan and Stephen Strong, all the way from Down Under. That's 8 a.m. Melbourne time on Friday morning for our latest installment of our alien ancestry. And I can't wait to get into all of that. But we've still got one segment left with Ben Emlyn Jones. And Ben, I kind of asked you something during the break. It was a throwaway kind of jokey comment at the time. I suppose it's got kind of serious implications when you think about it. I was joking with you, you know, I wonder if once space is opened up and we get confirmation of these other beings and it's like Star Trek scenarios, is there going to be any recompense for people that were taken and probed without their consent at an intergalactic court of reparations, abductions? I don't know, man. I don't know.
It's a difficult one to think to sound, but it's certainly interesting to speculate on that, because I mean, I actually have to think about this when I was writing my trilogy, my Roswell trilogy, because this sort of thing does come up in that. It's not just the extraterrestrials themselves, but it's the government's role in perhaps suppressing information and official ridicule and denial and things like that, which has caused a lot of psychological trauma to many, many people. But there may well have to be a massive Truth and Reconciliation Commission situation, certainly in terms of the state versus the people, but also possibly the ETs themselves, the aliens. They're going to have some explaining to do. So, because I certainly would like to know why they're doing this to us. Because, as I said, they're very different. They do very, very many different things, but a lot of it involves involuntary, non-consensual medical experiments and other kind of things. You know, abductions, taking people away without their permission. Yeah, it's unethical. It breaches fundamental human rights, and sometimes, they can be nasty. The aliens, as I've explained, they can be harmful. I mean, will we need some kind of defense or some kind of the Space Force? Yes, the Space Force. Maybe that's what it's for, Kev. Maybe they're anticipating this.
That's it. You know, I talked to Lon Strickler, and him and his team are working with what they call ultra-terrestrials right now, a group of beings that are talking about coming forward. And independent of that, separate from that, there's a woman talking about a cave somewhere in the US. I've seen her on Stephen Campion's Truth Seekers show. And she's in contact with these Nordic type entities. They're talking about wanting to come forward, show themselves. Are we getting to that point then, Ben, where it's going to be beyond any doubt? Because these things are going to turn up.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think we've reached a beyond any doubt point now. It's simply a case of not a really rational level. It's simply a cultural obstacle we have to overcome now. We have to get past this idea that, it's, what was it Georgia Sokolos said, the meme? I'm not saying it's aliens,
but it
is aliens. A strange kind of contradiction that we're getting this out of the UAPTF, as we've talked about on previous shows. They are literally doing this. They're literally saying it's not aliens, but it is aliens. It's definitely not aliens.
There's another show that suffers from what I call acute confirmation bias, because everything they look at, it was aliens, like literally everything.
Yeah, it's a very entertaining show, and it's informative in some ways. But brilliant
show.
I certainly don't agree with all of it any more than I did when I read Eric von Daniken's book when I was a little kid at school. So.
Yeah. But you were going to talk to us about A centre in London. What's happening, Ben?
Now, this is really incredible. I was astonished when I heard about this. Now, if you ever visit London, there's all kinds of famous sites you can see. You can go and see Big Ben, you can go and see the London Eye, go and see the Houses of Parliament. But there's something extraordinary, which is in a deceptively ordinary location. This is actually if you go into the fashionable heart of the West End, at number 7, Soho Square, you will see a little stripped Art Deco office block. It's white, it's painted white. It's in a corner between a couple of other buildings. There it is. Yeah, it's pretty nondescript. It's not particularly attractive in terms of its decoration. It's actually an office block where there's several different companies reside there. They sometimes buy, sometimes rent rooms, offices, and floors of that particular building. But I discovered, amazingly, that it used to be a UFO research center. I'm not kidding you. It was actually American. There was some British people there. Some of the people from Nick Pope's office used to go there. However, it was primarily an American outfit. Now, this includes an organization. Now, this is an article from a long time ago. This is an old article I came across. It's from 2016, I believe. And it talks about a unit that operates from the Pentagon. And this was kind of like a location where the unit had a kind of British detachment. Now, they don't name the unit, but it's pretty obvious that this is the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, or whatever it was called back then. It was post-ATIP, pre-UAPTF. It's pretty obvious from reading this article that is what they're talking about. So the UAPTF had an office in London, and it was run by a colonel from the Pentagon who used to visit at regular intervals. Used to come over and visit it. Now, when I heard about this through Colin Woolford, and he's a great UFO researcher, a good friend of mine as well. And we said, let's go and have a look at the place. So we did. We actually went to the location to check it out. Now, there's nothing strange about the building in particular. The reception desk was shut. We tried knocking on the door and ringing the doorbells, and received no reply. We just wanted to. We would only have asked a few polite questions. We weren't going to barge in or anything like that. And it turns out actually that it's no longer there. This office is actually no longer at that location. In fact, around the time that this article was published, it had actually moved out. And indeed, I checked. I put in 7 Soho Square into the search function of various properties and real estate and estate agent websites and property management websites. And it's all to let. Everything there is either let or to let by other organizations. So that begs the question, if that UAPTF branch has been moved out, has it been disbanded and it's just simply nowhere around at all? Or has it moved somewhere else? If it's moved somewhere else, does anyone know where it is? In which case, please let us know, because I'm curious to find out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you said it's not at this location anymore. It's probably at a different location, but a colonel from the Pentagon. I mean, that's not some junior ranking kind of person just coming over and shifting a few papers and answering the phone. That's significant, dude.
This is someone who's obviously very senior. He's a senior officer, and he's clearly the U.S. government took this seriously. To run this away station in Britain costs a lot of money. It's not cheap. The renting in central London, whether you rent or you buy a property, is very expensive. It's way more than most of the people who live outside London could afford.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who live in that area are all very wealthy. The organizations and the companies that have offices in that area all have a huge turnover. They thought it was very important to have this location, obviously, so it could be close to the Ministry of Defence, because they had some British people there. Obviously, they wanted to be close to Nick Pope, or whoever happened to be doing Nick Pope's or UFO desk job. They wanted to be close. They obviously were concerned about the work that was being done by the MOD's UFO desk. And for whatever reason, maybe the MOD officially has no position on the existence of extraterrestrials. Nick Pope has said that. We can neither confirm nor deny it, is his kind of catchphrase. They just investigate unknown aerial phenomena and get as much evidence as they can. They so far have not, at least publicly, they haven't actually released any kind of conclusions of what that these things might not be from Earth.
Now, you mentioned Nick Pope there, and I remember covering not long ago on one of the streams quite an infamous case from Scotland, 1990, if memory serves me correctly, the Calvine UFO incident. Now, this is quite interesting because Nick Pope says he had a picture like this, or one just like it, on his wall in the office. Quite a controversial case, hikers in Scotland claiming to see what, on appearance, a triangular-shaped craft, not too dissimilar from what Kaz describes at Pentre. Right?
Yeah, this is a remarkable photograph. It's very clear. It's you can see it's well exposed and well lit. The hikers obviously have quite a good camera with them.
Now, this is actually a reproduction, because what happened to the actual photographs is just as mysterious, because they were given to a local paper, and at the time we're talking about film in processed for images. And I think it might have been the Daily Record in Scotland. It was one of our papers anyway. But there was a break-in and all the pictures went missing.
Now, isn't that an interesting coincidence, Kev? It really is. Because luckily, they managed to get hold of some prints of this, and Nick Pope had a big blow-up one on his wall. But I don't remember the aeroplane there. Is that an airplane or a bird?
It was supposed to have been escorted by, I would imagine, a Harrier back then. Jump jet, probably. That's what we would have been kicking about in, most likely. And being from the Scottish Highlands, you got to appreciate for the audience out there as well, I was no stranger to the RAF using that as like practice for bombing runs, things like that. RAF Lossiemouth up the road. So it is an active area with that kind of military planes. And I tell you what, if you were trying to fly something or test something, maybe it's ours, I don't know. But the Scottish Highlands is pretty remote enough to maybe get away with it, right? Apart from the odd hiker here or there.
I've hiked in that area myself, and you do get military aircraft flying very low, like combat aircraft, and obviously on exercise. And it's a sort of place where you can go for miles and miles and not see anything. It's definitely within the British Isles. It's probably the wildest location of all. And that object there, it's hard to say what it's from. One little photograph like that, I see something that is diamond-shaped or possibly triangular or pyramidal, like you say. It may be like similar to what Kaz reports. It's white. I know several people. I know several skeptics, and there's this one guy I know who's a skeptic. He'll know who he is if he's listening. Whenever he says he thinks something is not a UFO or not alien, he will say, "I'm 100% sure that it is this." He always says that. It's his kind of catchphrase. I'm 100% sure that this is, when it comes to Pentre, he says, I'm 100% sure that was a drone. And he actually said to me, I'm 100% sure this is a balloon. Now, that doesn't look like any balloon I've ever seen before. But without more information, you can't rule it out. But I'm surprised he's 100. I'm certainly not 100% sure it's a balloon or not a balloon. All I see is an object, obviously a solid structured object. There is a military aircraft alongside it. Either whether it's escorting it or whether it's intercepting it, I don't know.
Now there's another kind of mock-up of the image there that somebody's done. But I found the bit here, and it's actually Nick Pope that talks about it. And he says, Mr. Pope, well, I'll read this bit here. It says, for about 10 minutes, in August 1992, hikers were walking in the Scottish Highlands close to Calvine, north of Pitlochry, when the incredible craft or aircraft appeared hovering over the remote landscape. For about 10 minutes, they watched and took 6 colour photographs before it sped off into the distance. The pair said during the incident, a number of military jets were seen making a series of low-level passes. At least one of the jets was also caught by them on camera. Mr. Pope and Channel 5 have reconstructed the image for a detailed report of the alleged cover-up, which will be broadcast on Friday, and the men whose identities are no longer known allegedly took the camera to the Scottish Daily Record, who in turn allegedly sent the pictures and negatives to the MOD. Case
Right.
closed, done. It says Mr.
Yeah.
Pope became the chief investigator, and it just goes on into his like more general career. Then
Well, I would recommend if anyone's listening and you take a photograph of this nature, don't send the originals to the media.
And if you're listening in
Don't.
Scotland and you know the people involved, or imagine the people involved somehow hear this, I'm a bit like Ben. I would definitely respect your privacy, but I would love to talk to you off air about just what it was you seen going down in the Highlands that day. Total confidentiality would be absolutely assured. Wouldn't even need to talk about it on the show. But I tell you, I'd love to have that conversation, man, because for me, that's a stunning case. And again, Nick Pope, we could be talking about something that's totally smoke and mirrors. I don't know, but there seems something to that one, dude.
There certainly is. I mean, yeah, please do come forward to Kev or myself or anyone you feel you can trust. The description, though, is amazing. They describe hovering. Now, that means it's not an aeroplane. Airplanes, well, unless they have, like the Harrier, of course, does have like a downward thruster so it can hover, but it makes a lot of noise. It's not a helicopter. There's no rotor on there. It could be a balloon, but then I've never seen a balloon of that shape before. It doesn't appear to have a gondola or a ballast bag or anything like that underneath it. It's very, very difficult. Like I say, for just these photographs, you can't really tell what it is. But obviously, the people decided it was interesting enough to photograph. There's no reason to think that they've made this up. They're anonymous, therefore, they're not looking for fame. It's have they been paid? I don't know if they've been paid any money for this sort of thing or not. That's hard to say. It certainly has not been published that they've been paid any money.
And if they had, if they'd been paid money, I'd have imagined the Daily Record would have definitely published something, right?
Yeah, and indeed, the fact that the first thing they did was just send it all to the MOD.
Look at that, because they were expecting news to come out at the start of 2021. This is why I'd covered it at the time. But they actually put it back 50 years, like the JFK papers. The MOD said, you're not talking about that, you're not seeing that. So that's why I'm skeptical when Nick Pope talks about it as well, because he admits himself he's bound by the Official Secrets Act. So anything classified, he can't truly actually give us the inside scoop on that, or he'd get in trouble. I get that, that's okay. Yeah. But the fact that he's kept it for 50 years, Ben.
Exactly. The fact they've reclassified it is really suspicious. I mean, I understand that Nick Pope can't say certain things. Lou Elizondo can't say certain things. Yep. I know that. But if they're in the same position. However, if this has that Steve Mera erroneously calls a rational explanation, then why does it need to be classified in this way? If it needs to be classified in this way, and again reclassified for another 50 years when it was supposed to be released, that indicates this is something that the details of this are possibly known, or at least more is known secretly than we've been told publicly. Either this is some kind of extraterrestrial craft that has appeared, and again, it's classic flying saucer type aliens, or it may be a secret aircraft of a very unusual type that the government doesn't want publicized. Either way, clearly it's not a weather balloon, it's not swamp gas, it's not any of these things that the skeptics have. Some skeptics have actually said that's what it is. It's just a balloon. Someone said it was an airship of some kind.
That location there, sorry to interrupt, but that's like, as the crow flies, maybe 50 to 70 miles from Loch Ness.
That's right in the heart of
up to if you go directly up to the northwest, you would land at Loch Ness,
It's right in the heart of Scotland, right in the remote areas of the
It's where you can't get a
right.
signal on your phone. Even when you travel up there, your phone goes dead. There's like a black spot when you go between Pitlochry and Dalwhinnie. And it's beautiful. It is jaw-droppingly beautiful.
Yes.
But there's nothing. So if you were like testing something, or you were trying to occult something from public eyes, what a brilliant place to be doing it.
Exactly, it is the perfect place. Alternatively, if you were from another planet and you were visiting this planet, It's a good place to come down, actually, if you didn't want people seeing you. I mean, there's hardly anyone lives there. You only get a couple of hikers and things like that. But coming back to the suppression of evidence, and this is suppression, that to me is one of the biggest red flags you can have. And I think it essentially discredits a lot of the debunking situations that go on. I know there's other examples, such as the Westall UFO in Australia.
Oh, that's a fascinating one.
Isn't it just, Jam? The researchers who went looking into that they wanted to examine the initial media reports from 1966. So they went to the TV station and asked, can you get this out of your archive for us? We'd like to look at the video. And there's no reason why they would say no. So they said, yes, we'll do it, of course. They went to the archive, and the tape had been removed. It had been taken out. This is very unusual because this TV station always stores its past programs in its archive. But the TV, it had been removed. Someone had taken it out before this request was put in. So obviously, it probably happened quite close to the time. Someone went in there and said, you've got to remove that from your archive just in case some nosy fools from the ufology community come knocking on your door.
You know, I just noticed there as well, right? I just noticed there, the Westall, I like my numbers, but it was on April the 6th in 1966. What 6 is going on there? Yeah.
6. It's a 6466.
Folks, anyone out there rolling their eyes, I know it means nothing. I just like repeating numbers. It is what it is, you know.
Numerology and all that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, Mr. Greenwood, the science teacher, he's now come forward and he's speaking out about this. And this is quite really strange because this guy was really someone who didn't want to get famous. He refused to speak to the media for many, many years. He was scared off, basically. Some uniformed guerrilla-type thugs came round and gave him a hard time, warned him that he'd never teach again if he said anything. You know, they put fake stories about how he's an alcoholic and he'd be sacked from the school and things like that. And he did. He kept his mouth shut for 55 years. Now then suddenly, I think it could be the reason why he changed his mind could be because of the ATIP UAP profile of UFOs, which has changed. He went and he did a interview with Channel 7 Australia, and he's sitting there, an old guy now, obviously. He was like a young student teacher at the time, and he repeated basically what the other witnesses had said, because the kids say the same thing. They said no, it wasn't a childhood prank. We really did see these things, and these are all people like in their middle ages now. You know, they're all quite late middle aged. Yeah, they say, oh, it was real. Yeah, we really saw it. So they've actually come together. They have reunions and they talk about it. A craft is sometimes maybe several saucer-shaped crafts landed near that school, and the kids they were so curious they ran out of school to look at it.
Well, I remember
they got quite close to it.
Our good friend from down under, Luna, when she was on the show one time telling us about her UFO experience in Australia. It's right over the top of her. And we were talking about the Scottish Highlands being remote, dude. Think about Australia. Most of that is empty. You know, think of what could be going on in the skies over there.
Well, I've been to the outback in Australia. I mean, I tell you can drive for miles.
Wait a minute. Wait. You've been there?
I've been to the outback of Australia. Yeah.
Okay. That means we can fly. We can fly our Australian flag today then.
There we go,
man.
Yeah. Good old Aussies. Yeah. That's great. But yeah, it is a very remote location. I mean, the journalist Ross Coulthard has just published a book, which I'm absolutely desperate to read because he talks about a lot of Australian cases. There's other people like Gary Opeth and other researchers who've been doing this for a lot longer. And Nexus magazine, of course, is based in Australia. And if you haven't read that, honestly, this is not an advert. They're not paying me, but I'm a regular subscriber to this magazine. If you love the Kev Baker Show, you'll love this magazine.
You'll
really
be well aware of Evan and Stephen Strong then that are coming on Thursday night. They're often included in that magazine. Talk about aliens, ancient aliens, but mega ancient aliens way, way back in the day, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I've heard of them. Yeah, and Australia, you know, is an absolute hotbed for this sort of thing. There's UFOs. There's all kinds of creatures such as the Yowie, which is like a Bigfoot-like creature.
Have you seen the bunyip? The bunyip's the weirdest cryptid in the world. It's crazy looking.
Very strange, yeah. It's quite a scary beast, that is. It lives in water. It's a scary creature. There's also the There's also other. What was I thinking of? Hang on, it's gone now. But I was thinking of another really, really amazing. Oh yes, there's also like living fossils such as the Tasmanian wolf. Now this is considered to be extinct. The last one died in a zoo in the 1930s. It's a dog-like creature. It's not a dog. It's a marsupial. It's more closely related to kangaroos, but it looks like a dog. And it was said to be extinct. However, Richard Freeman of the Centre for Fortean Zoology has been on several expeditions to that area and believes that the Tasmanian wolf is still alive.
Yep, I've had Donnie, our Aboriginal brother. He swears they're still out there. Ken Rotman, another person from Australia we've had on the show. Absolutely fantastic information from down there. A lot of it untapped, and I just really appreciate the fact we're getting to hear some of the kind of stories that often aren't shared by Australians, First People. And it's really very privileged to be a part of that. And it's always a privilege, Ben, to do a show with you, my friend. So next month we'll do it all again, but thank you for being here today, man.
It's been absolutely great, Kev. Yeah, thanks. It's been another great show. Time's flown, as it always does. We've filled up the 2 hours very, very well, I think. So thanks for having me on.
I think so. And yes, I'll be back tomorrow with Don Wiskin and Jimmy Jeans. Stay tuned for more live radio coming up on your #1 network, Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Wherever you are, make it TFR and Denny touch that dial. Well, thank you very much, my good friend Ben.
You're very welcome.
We're still on the YouTube. We've still got, I think it's just me watching on Twitch. We've got a couple over there on the Odyssey. Thank you very much for today. Always, always love our conversations, dude.
Me too. Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for everyone for tuning in and leaving your comments and things like that. I'll make sure I put a link up on the Hapanmo blog as well.
And next time when you come on next month, then right, we'll go on Odyssey, we'll go on Twitch, and I will unleash you from the algorithmic shackles, and we can talk about everything. Okay?
Oh, thank goodness for that!
You like that? You like that? See, that's why I asked you today. Now, to be fair, you have to let the audience know. I did offer you the chance. I said we can temper it. If we go on YouTube, we have to be good boys, but we didn't have to come. So it's not that I didn't give you the chance today, right?
You did, yeah. You did say, look, we could discuss the dreaded C word.
Yeah, the everything that everybody knows about going on.
Yeah, but then we couldn't go on YouTube because, of course, YouTube hate people talking about it.
Yeah.
I've just uploaded a video, and I've uploaded it to all my. I've uploaded it to BitChute and Odyssey. I can't put it on YouTube.
Well, that's it. Then next time, right? Next time, and we'll arrange a date in a moment. It'll be Ben Emlyn Jones, uncensored and unleashed.
Oh, man, because there's so much to talk about with the old disease.
Yes, there is. But that's for next time, Mr. Ben. That's for next time.
I'm not going to say anything now, Kev.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's been a blast. I'll be back tomorrow with Don and Jimmy Jeans. That's going to be another great show. But thank you all for your support. Thank you all for being here. Remember, you're all awesome. And don't believe a word that me and Ben Emlyn Jones say. I just hope that what we say encourages you to check out what we're saying, to think for yourself. We provide, and we trust you to decide. Have a good night, and God bless.